far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Welcome to another episode of 100 ABC Women. We are going to be talking about housing access and community security in this episode. Black Canadians face systemic and structural barriers to housing, including anti-Black racism in rental markets, discriminatory lending practices, and historical wealth disparities. These challenges lead to higher rates of core housing need, overcrowding, and housing insecurity compared to the general public. So in this episode, we're going to be discussing housing barriers, home ownership strategies, community stability, and policy levers to strengthen access and equity. Let me introduce you to our two fabulous panelists who will be addressing these topics. The Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine is one of the three co-founders of 100 ABC Women. She's a national icon, an eminent trailblazer on so many levels, having arrived in Canada from Grenada in the early 1960s. She worked her way up in her field, education, and with the Metropolitan Separate School Board in Toronto, all the way up to principal and supervisory officer. Now, beyond the classroom, Jean's commitment to social justice grew through decades of community involvement. She served on the boards of York University, the Hospital for Sick Kids, the Donwood Institute, and Harborfront, and she chaired, more importantly, the Metropolitan Toronto Housing Authority. As the national president of the Congress of Black Women of Canada, she was a strong advocate for equity and inclusion. And this is really her claim to fame for a lot of Canadians nationally. In 1993, she made history as the first African Canadian woman elected to Canada's House of Commons, representing Etobicoke Lakeshore in the Toronto area. And then she won 4 consecutive elections and served in Parliament until 2006. Now, her parliamentary work was marked by landmark accomplishments, including introducing legislation to protect low-income individuals, including single mothers, and successfully negotiating unanimous support for a historic motion designating February as Black History Month in Canada. Our second panelist, Josephine Sindani. She's a 2026 100 ABC honoree, a construction executive, entrepreneur, and community leader with experience spanning hands-on trades, business leadership, and workforce development across local, national, and international spaces. She is the owner and founder of JS Group, a Burlington-based construction company built on the values of being partners in community, partners in construction. This company is committed to maximizing property investments while fostering meaningful community impact. From subcontractor to lead contractor, she worked her way up by getting her hands dirty, learning every part of the trade, and completing high-profile jobs like the Pan Am Paralympic Games renovations at the Sheraton Hotel. Her company manages more than 140 properties across Southern Ontario and works closely with Skills Ontario to facilitate the next generation of youth in construction, especially youth in underrepresented communities. Welcome to both of you to this very timely conversation. So we're going to first start with talking about homelessness, because national homelessness counts indicate that homelessness increased by about 38% between 2018 and 2022. So I want to hear from you. What does housing access and community security mean to both of you, personally and professionally? We'll start with Josephine.
So, as many of you may know my story, housing has been a back and forth staple of what I've been working so hard to provide to just the general public in general. Housing is directly related to your mental health, your education, and your just day-to-day health in general. When it comes to the level of homelessness that we are seeing now, it's unprecedented. Um, People that are the stigma around someone being homeless, they're not providing to society, they're not included into the day-to-day of society in general. But that's no longer what homelessness is. Homelessness is someone that cannot afford an extra $20 or $25 for rent or the $50 for utilities because a rental property that's 1 bedroom is 1,500 and their monthly income is 2,000. So it hits so close to me because we need to figure out a solution. We know the problem. It's something that we have discussed in length and length and length, but what are we doing to actually solve and provide a solution to our many Canadians? We live in this beautiful country. We have been here for maybe 5, 10, 15, or been born here. And to see the state of housing and the crisis that it's at is it's so scary.
Hmm.
So hopefully today we can discuss ways to not only improve the direction of housing stability, but also come up with ideas with the panelists as well as our attendees,
Hmm.
because their voices matter in this discussion, and it's so important to get real life um, real life talks with people and the day-to-day people, because it's their lives and it's my life, it's my children's lives. So like I said, this is such an
Yeah.
important conversation and I cannot wait to get into the nitty-gritty of it. So
Yeah, so thanks for that. Dr. Augustine, I mentioned in your bio, you arrived in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
So the landscape has changed tremendously, and you are also in a leadership position with a housing authority. So what does, housing access and community security, what does that mean to you?
Sarah, when we talk about housing, immediately what comes to mind is a discussion that's taking place everywhere in our society, and that is mental health. If one does not have a safe, a secure, a comfortable, a place that one can call, as it were, their nest, the place where they can go at the end of the day, or the place where they can, it is a disruptive element in one's life, and it is also a disruptive element in the society. The issue of housing is one that over the years, not only Canada, but everywhere, we have had to pay attention to, because this is really the basis. I mean, if we go back to the cave days when, people found shelter in different ways, there were always opportunities too for um, the sharing of accommodation. When I came in 1960, um, the housing issue was not as acute as it is today. Um, we were at the time, I would imagine, about 17 million of us in Canada. And at the same time, the places like colleges and universities and community centers provided accommodation for newcomers, for the immigrant families. I spent, I think, forget now how many years, as the chair of Metro Toronto Housing Authority. And there we had hundreds of people lined up for rent geared to income. At the time, we said 30% of your income should be about the measure for housing. There were several programs that the federal government had that brought about, together with provincial bodies, these public housing. We know that the federal government got out of the issue of public housing. And so Metro Toronto Housing went into what is now Ontario, oh, at the time it was Ontario Housing Corporation, and now it is the responsibility of the city. But at the same time, the lineup for accommodation, the need for accommodation, the need for the safety of a place to call home, the the fact that the responsibility of community, the responsibility of the municipality and the province for housing became very acute. Several things have been tried over the years.
Hmm.
The co-op housing
Hmm.
as as a measure, and we know here in Ontario we had set out with hundreds of units of committed to, and then of course one government came and took the envelope and took everything off the table. And so we have been grappling with this issue of how can we find um, opportunities for affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
How can we have those affordable housing in places where there are schools,
Mm-hmm.
where there is community life? Because again, housing is associated with community life, with schools, with churches,
Mm-hmm.
with markets, with, the mom and pop shops. I mean, there is that community is built around the whole issue of housing.
Mm-hmm.
And several times when things were put on the table as to what could be done, there was always a not in my backyard kind of when using laneways or using, different
Yeah.
pieces of land in different places to build
Mm-hmm.
was not the something that was appreciated by communities.
Mm-hmm.
So we've
Yeah.
had this problem
Yeah.
of affordability, of stability, accommodating people who are joining us.
Mm-hmm.
And the big conversation now is around student and student housing.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we have students
Mm-hmm.
be in a safe environment, not surfing from one person's couch to the next, but finding student housing where they can have a safe environment, where it's affordable,
Mm-hmm.
where they can begin their early life.
Yeah. So both of you have sort of um, skimmed over, how the landscape has changed. And you've just mentioned how it's changed for students, where before there was, on-campus housing, etc., where now there's less and less of it. Um, so the common barriers to finding affordable housing, whether it's for newcomers, racialized persons, seniors, because that's a growing population, or young families. What are some of the most common barriers? And we're going to start with Josephine, and then Jean, you can jump in
Yeah.
with, yeah. Josephine?
So we all know that we have a housing shortage. The most significant barrier is that we're not building enough houses, that we are simply taking our time. There's red tape that goes around building houses that are the most simplest homes to build, whether it's a sixplex or a bungalow with a unit underneath. The amount of effort it takes to go through the bureaucracy of actually building is absolutely mind-boggling at sometimes because you're just wanting to pull your hair out. The raising cost of construction, the cost of material, labor, insurance, financial development charges, and the infrastructure needed to withstand the growing population or the growing density in that area. The skilled trade labor shortage. This is something that I talk about so often. We can't build homes without people. So, how do we get those people with the right set of skills to build, whether it's electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and other construction sectors, whether it's hands-on or the back end of it? Housing policy and workforce development must go hand in hand, but yet they're completely segregated in how we approach the housing build and market. And in general, it just makes no sense because why aren't we working together to make things easier? Approval and development timelines, it shouldn't take 6 to 8 months to build, to go through the city permit process. It's the same house that we're doing over and over again. What more do you want in terms of information or engineering stamps or drawings or architect designs, does the city require to make this feasible? So things like that is again, it just adds to the totality of why we're in this position in the first place. Affordability and the financing, higher interest rates, lending requirements have made it more difficult for many Canadians to qualify for mortgages or financing housing projects in general.
Mm-hmm.
lack of diverse, lack of diverse housing options, like affordable housing, corporate housing, missing the middle housing ground, senior housing, which we just spoke about just shortly. We have such a huge market for them because the boomers are
Yeah, they're aging
they're
and
aging out
retiring.
and retiring. What are we going to do with them?
Yeah.
We can't just left them to fend, and that's essentially what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest issues is housing literacy and financial literacy, home ownership, renting, housing maintenance, mortgages, insurance, property taxes, and the long-term housing plan that an
Mm-hmm.
individual or family may have.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
one of the things directly to me and the Black community, certain communities, including Indigenous, Black, and newcomers, are marginalized out of even housing and renting in general. Many of them experience additional barriers related to access, affordability, and financing.
Mm-hmm.
And these housing opportunities are something that should be a basic necessity. And addressing housing challenges requires ensuring solutions that are inclusive and equitable. And again,
So
it's
I'm going to
simple.
stop you there and
Sorry.
yes, and have Jean jump in. Um,
It's the whole issue,
yeah,
Sarah, of home ownership, the issue of home
yeah.
ownership.
Mm-hmm.
There is something in our society that says that you make it when you can buy a home. You
Yeah.
talk to young people,
Mm-hmm.
the general idea is I want to own a home. I want to have something for my family.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, wages have not kept up with with cost.
Yeah.
The issue of all these regulations, as Josephine was saying, to get a mortgage, to get a to to get all the what is needed by governments to ensure that that the property is safe. Environmental issues, a whole lot of things come to play. At the same time, I think that for immigrants, for Black folks like myself and others, it's triply difficult simply because, again, we make less than um, than the average than the average white Canadian. That the banks and other lending institutions look at our applications a little with more scrutiny. Um, the issue of where and in what neighborhood. And so we think all these things have gone down, we've gone past that, but they're there in very subtle ways that
Exactly.
make it almost difficult sometimes for Black folks
Mm-hmm.
to to buy in a neighborhood or to get the mortgage for a certain type of
Mm. So for
cost.
our American friends, redlining does exist here in
Yes,
Canada. It
yes,
does.
yes,
It totally
yes.
does. So speaking of, because we've just been talking a lot about, mortgage and securing finance for people who wish to own a home. We're going to get to the rental market, but let's focus on home ownership now. What role does financial literacy play in helping individuals and families successfully um, enter the home ownership market? Financial literacy. Josephine, you
But
want to
I think
start?
financial
Oh, yes.
literacy is important.
Hmm.
Simply, I have a Center for Young Women's Empowerment, and
Yes.
one of the things we do at
Hmm.
top of the list is financial literacy, getting them to see the value of money, to know the value, to know what $5 can buy or whatever, and to know the institutions, where money is managed and where conversations are taking place around the issue of spending and money and credit cards and all of these things.
Hmm.
So I think it's important that when we talk about um, getting a mortgage or we talk about dealing with the financial institutions, this is why I would imagine there are all these wealth management and other professionals who are working with people, not just the real estate, but agents, but also individuals who can speak to people about money, about saving, and how much you need. Because we notice over the years, um, there, depending on the mortgage, depending on the whatnot, there is so much that you can put down and so much you can make as a down payment, and then that moves again in a little while, depending on interest rates and other financial situations.
Hmm.
But it's important that anyone who is thinking of getting a house, buying a house, getting accommodation of any kind, buying accommodation of any kind, that they know about money and that they know the rules.
Hmm.
You know, I
Credit score, building up your credit score, things
yes,
like that.
yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Josephine?
So, just to go off on points that Dr. Augustine mentioned, knowledge gives people options. When you understand budgeting and crediting and mortgage and insurance, home maintenance, again, financial literacy is not just about money, it's a whole broad spectrum. It gives people independence and confidence. And if I knew this when I was younger, especially whether I'm in high school or going through university and stuff like that, I would have made um, different choices in regards to what I did in terms of wanting to purchase my first property. I wasn't aware of all the other facets that come with it. And then the housing conversation with financial literacy helps people understand how to prepare for home ownership. These are conversations that should be had long before you're looking at purchasing a home so that you have the understanding of the whole process in general, managing the costs, protecting your investment, because
Hmm.
as many of us know, housing is that big investment that everyone wants to get into, whether you're doing it for yourself or for your children. Housing is a stable or should be stable investment. Knowledge doesn't solve every challenge, but it gives people the tools to navigate it, and that makes them more effective. And us as Black women, it has always been difficult, especially as a single parent, to navigate getting a mortgage, because the stipulations of what is required are much, much higher. So we often talk about affordability and affordable housing, but we should also talk about affordable knowledge. Information should not be privileged, and that's what it always seems like when I navigate.
Interesting. Can you give an example of that? That's a
Um,
very important point.
So I can give a direct example. When
Hmm.
I purchased my first home 8 years ago, I did it in the thought of investing and doing a severance on the property. So my whole idea was to get the land, which I did, and sever the properties, sever to four different properties and build four homes. I did not know the financial situ I didn't know about the financial requirements to do that, and there was ways to do it where I would have been able to keep the property. So I could have rented the home that was currently there, sever the other properties, so I'm still generating income to pay off the mortgage. I could have sold one property, and so on and so on. Another thing is that when I provided the idea to a multitude of people and investors, they were all ready to take the whole project and go with it. But they didn't want to include me because they said I was too young. I didn't know what I was talking about, yet I designed the whole entire property. I designed all the houses, did the cash flow and all that. But I was one, too young and too Black, to be taken seriously. So again, it was a privileged conversation and privileged knowledge, because if I did do it the way that I should have done, that would have been an investment property that would have lasted generation for my children and myself.
Hmm.
Lo and behold, 3 years later, the property made $7.6 million. And I'm just looking at it every time I drive by it. I'm like, oh, okay, this could have been it. So that direct knowledge makes me so not angry, but it makes me want to make
Frustrated, yeah.
It's frustrating.
Hmm.
So making sure that people understand the housing market, making people understand that every person should have access to financial literacy and housing education, just the information, because those informations can make you um, make informed decisions,
Yes.
and
Well,
that is for themselves and their families. So yeah.
so can we move to the rental housing conversation, right? Because there is an acute, well, overall, housing is in short supply, whether you want to buy it or rent it. What are some of the things you are seeing in terms of the rental market that is just making even rental housing inaccessible? Jean?
Well, I think there are two or three things we need to think about right now in terms of the rental market. And for me, the first one is the advent of the B&B, um,
Airbnb, yeah.
Airbnb, where someone would use that as a way of earning, and at the same time, that could have been a place that would have been available as permanent housing. The other has to do with what is usually referred to as the boom and the bust um, of taking on this the debt. So the interest rates go down, and there were people who jump in, and then the interest rates go. We've seen this within recent times. The interest rates go up, and then people are left saying, "I can't afford to carry this mortgage, or to carry this amount." I think the issue of regulations again. There was a time when in the 60s, when I think about the number of us who were here, we were renting a room in somebody's house. So we were sharing and all of that. We now have a lot of rules around where people could, what portion of their home they can rent, and also rules around how many how many people they can have in one room. There was a time we didn't have all those regulations, and so that made it easier for someone to find a room somewhere.
Hmm.
But we know now that there's the issue of find a room somewhere is not an easy solution for someone with one or two children.
Hmm. Josephine?
I'm gonna add to that is that as let's say as a landlord, I don't want to get too much into it, but Canada's boring, and the mortgage and how we have a 5-year fixed rate term, and mortgages itself is usually amortized for 25 to 30 years. That means that every few years your borrowing cost will or may change. So as a landlord, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. You don't have that long fixed term rate. So say we have a property that is a mortgage of $1,200 a month for the next 5 years. Lo and behold, 5 years later, it's going to be 1,900. And who is left to take on that cost? It is the tenants, because again, they're not going to be paying for it. The tenants are going to be the ones that are going to take the brunt of that. And that puts us in a very difficult situation, because where is the stability? Where is the rental stability in general?
Hmm.
Yes, you do have the down payment to purchase a home. Okay, fantastic. Now you're renting it out to someone. Okay, amazing. We have another home available on the market. Someone, a great tenant, is able to afford it. They are happy and so on. Now you just are kicking a whole millions of people out of the rental market, because that fixed term has now increased or doubled. And that 30%, that magic number that we have in terms of how much you should be spending on housing, is no longer accessible. And
Hmm.
we're in this situation now where there are people that are living in tents because they cannot afford living anywhere else. making a choice between your son's soccer jersey and groceries for the week, or putting up heat, or even a cell phone, because we need cell phones now. We're such an interconnected community where technology is leading the way. So how do we figure out a way to, I know these are policies that are going to be difficult to change, but again, we have other countries that we have examples of that are doing
hmm
a fantastic job, whether it's the US, Germany, and France, Denmark. There's so many other countries that I can list off. But how do we go from here? So,
hmm
yes.
Yeah. Thanks for that particular perspective, the landlord perspective. Another kind of housing is the transitional housing, because that's another problem connected to homelessness. I'm in particular thinking about newcomers and refugees because they've been in the news and used very often by political entities as the scapegoats for the housing crisis that we have. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Are they really contributing to that crisis? And what are you seeing in terms of the way they are housed?
Well, I think the responsibility of the federal government, the province, and the municipality for people that we agree, whether at the UN level, that we would take in as refugees, or whether it's, at whatever level with immigration, that we're having people join us. I think we have a responsibility to ensure that those people are housed. And we've had really terrible examples around us here in Toronto and in other places where we have large numbers who have come across our border asking for status and at the same time needing accommodation and having no place to put them and having them in very unsafe, insecure, and in certain circumstance having one or two of them die as a result of sleeping in the outdoors or in the cold. Um, Community has always come forward to help in situations like that. And if we can go back over the years with Canada taking groups of people from different countries, people who are part of the nationals here have come forward to find housing and to help with housing.
hmm
And the churches, the community organizations
hmm
have helped to transition people.
hmm
Well, now there is no way they can transition into what? Because there's nothing out there.
hmm
At the same time, um, there is the governments have been putting money into things like hotel spaces and at the same time
Often rundown hotels.
spending money on these hotel spaces. I forgot I had to turn my phone off.
hmm
Into and ensuring that people have a place but it is transitional. It's for a time. It's not, and it is almost criminal when you see children caught in that situation, in a rooming house, in a hotel room, day after day, with no ability to go to school
hmm
and no ability uh, to see
hmm
the accommodation that might be available down the line.
hmm So you were mentioning about communities that the newcomers belong to. I'm thinking about Ukraine when the
Yes.
Ukrainians out in Manitoba, when they arrived, Alberta, were able to quickly organize and magically there was housing for them. I'm thinking about the Syrians. I know in Ottawa here, uh, suddenly housing was there, transitional, yes, but it was there for them. And I'm curious about what happens to us? The Jamaican community, the Ethiopian community, the Somali community, like what's going on there? Josephine?
I think the best approach to have this confrontation is like avoid singling out a group to blame.
You're
I think
correct. Yeah.
once we start blaming a single group, then we lose sight of what is actually the problem, which is
Hmm.
how do we build enough houses to meet the needs
Yeah.
of our growing population.
Hmm.
And when it comes to transitional housing, it plays such a huge role because it provides temporary accommodation and support with people that are trying to establish themselves. The challenge is not like transitional housing existing. The challenge is to ensure that we have enough housing across the entire housing continent, from emergency shelters to transitional housing to affordable rentals. It boggles my mind because I was one of those people. Again, housing is a strong thing for me, that I was looking for a shelter. So I'm a single mom with two kids, couldn't afford it. I was in university, didn't know what to do, and I'm calling shelters on a daily basis, and they have nothing available. So I'm here with two kids. I'm not able to afford anything, and there was no help for it sounds awful, but no help for me as a Canadian. I'm down on my luck, don't know what to do. And I just needed help to get me to a point where I could be stable. And that caused me to get hives. I was medically admitted to the hospital because I was just so stressed. And it's something that goes around in a circle. Once you have housing stabilized, everything else around your life will become stable also. So, how do we figure out a way? Again, this is the question that we're trying to figure out. How do we figure out a way to provide a significant amount of housing supply? Um, and not just keep wasting billions and billions of dollars into these temporary housing solutions that are not looking at our future as Canadians and the environment of the housing market in general. So yeah, it's literally a bridge from crisis to stability. How do we get from the crisis situation to a stable situation? And that is the golden question. So yeah.
Mhm. At the end of this conversation, we're going to look at possible solutions. One other type of housing I'm curious about because it's come back up in the conversations here in Quebec, social housing, logements sociaux. Uh, Jean, what are your thoughts on what happened to social housing?
What happened to social housing is the fact that the funds and the the determination of the political whatever to address the issue. And so once the dollars are not on the table,
Mm,
once the envelopes are not given, and there is no commitment in terms of community push, then somehow it gets other things seem to take to take the place of where that emphasis should be. So the issue of social housing will never go away because you talk about co-op, you talk about the ability to support any number of group of people who are able to put the plan together, who can work with a developer. We had lots of those things on the table. Some of that had been pushed to the side of with this the issue of affordability and um, and where one can acquire the land to do such things, and where is the political support to make sure that those things happen.
mhm. So, we've talked about, the community push you were talking about. What lessons can policymakers learn from these communities, that have successfully addressed housing inequities? Do you have examples of success where, you know, communities were able to find a solution?
Yeah, we have about three or four things around us here. I'm here
Mhm.
in Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Okay.
We have a couple properties that came about as a result of community working with the developer, doing the map, doing the whatever, looking at the funding, government assistance, and finding place for, some seniors, single mothers. Um, there is a property out in Mississauga called Camille's Place, and again, that was built. The Congress of Black Women of Canada worked with the developer and the envelopes that were on the table to do this. But of course, another government came in and the program was stopped. And so, some good examples of what could happen when communities work with the municipality, work with developers, work with funders to do something for the community. But and I'm sure there are other examples all
Oh,
over
yeah.
the place.
Hmm. Josephine, what have you seen?
So, in terms of social housing
No,
specifically,
in terms of, examples of initiatives to address, the housing crisis, where there's been some sort of partnership between, governments, community,
so
corporate.
I consider myself a social builder. So I
Okay.
believe in a collective solution in terms of the housing
Hmm.
problem that we're facing now.
Hmm.
But that means bringing together governments, not-for-profit builders, educators, financial institutions, and different communities, residents to work towards a common goal is where we need to actually see it play out because again there's always a disconnect whether it's governments not-for-profit builders education there's always a disconnecting factor or mitigating issue so creating opportunity for people to access housing and understand housing and maintain housing ultimately thrives within our communities, but we don't have that commonality. We don't have that togetherness that I so speak of. So housing is not just about shelters; it's about health, opportunity, dignity, education, and essential and employment. We're investing billions and billions of dollars into skills trade. This is our future, but we're leaving it to the next generation with more questions than answers. So I I literally just say, let's stop only talking about affordable housing and talking about solutions. Let's actually just build. Let's do it. Let's build these houses. Let's create these partnerships. Let's create a workforce, and let's create communities that we want to see our families thriving and continue having secure, safe, housing for everyone. It's like I said, it's that simple.
Mhm. At
Jean?
the same time, it's almost scary when you see what experts are saying. Things like we need 4.8 million additional homes. And again, when we talk about to restore affordability, and I live in an area that's all condo left and left and right of me. And if we're talking about affordability and we're talking about 4.8 million homes, are we talking about a combination, Josephine, of
I think it's a combination. I actually want to say something because you mentioned the condos. I just helped my mom move out her condo, but these condos are not designed to maintain a family. They're designed so inadequate that it drives me and boggles me how someone could approve such designs. Because again, for me, it's I always tell the kids it's always simple whatever the big crazy question or the big problem is, it's always simple to fix. So just simply designing something that is actually a home for someone to enjoy for years and years and years, that is the first step. The second step is literally communicating between these sections of government because we know that we need to make 4.8 million homes or 5 million homes. We know we need the workforce. Why aren't we leaning on these smaller companies to facilitate that? Giving the little guys an opportunity to build and provide that for their community because there's lots of communities that have 10, 20, 30, maybe even hundreds of builders that are more than willing to step out and do what needs to do what needs to be done. Like I have callous hands because I'm on the tools sometimes for 14, 15 hours because we need to get things done. But there's no appreciation for that also because we are slaving away. We understand how hard it is to build just one home. To build 4.8 million homes and we're not given the resources to do so, we're just putting ourselves in a position where we're going to be talking about this in 5 years. That's
Hmm.
it. We're going to be talking about this in 5 years.
Do you consider housing a human right,
Yes.
Yeah,
like healthcare?
definitely, definitely.
Yeah? Can you
Yes.
speak to that? Because I'm getting the impression that just like healthcare, part of the reason why these governments that, come one after the other and all these corporate entities, because they're not looking at it as a human right and as a fundamental key to social harmony and having a productive and healthy country, that's part of the reason why, solutions like what Josephine is suggesting just sit on the table or brushed aside. What are your thoughts on housing as a human right? Not just housing, adequate housing.
Exactly.
Josephine, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, so I would say at the end of the day, housing supplies stability. If you have a stable home, everything around you can be stable. Especially if you have children. You want them to come home and not be scared to walk down the street to get into their home. You see all these movies like Hardball where you have these little kids running to their condos or apartments or co-op housing, and there's gangs on the side of the road, and it's not a safe place to be. How do you expect a child to flourish in that environment? So adequate housing, yes, 100% should be our main priority, but also it's a community. We are a community. We are not an individualized race. We work towards building relationships within ourselves and within other people and within communities, whether it's locally, internationally. We are a community-based uh, species. So why aren't we working as a community to solve this problem?
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's just adequate space. If you have a home that you feel safe and are taking care of and loving and putting gardens at the front of the home, do you really think you're going to be moving and being stressed out about it? I don't want to be moving every 4 to 5 years because the mortgage rate has changed and I can't afford it. Like, it makes no sense to me. So, as a person that has been homeless, as a person that has experienced homelessness chronically for a time of my life and my children's life, it is so important to understand that having a stable home can translate to fixing a lot of these issues that we have in our day to day. And
Jean?
that's education. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I see Jean wants to jump in with something.
Well, I was focusing on the fact that um when we think about health and the determinants of health, of good health and whatnot, housing is right in there. If you're not housed, if you're not properly sheltered, if you don't have that safe environment, again, we can see how it affects everything in the society. At the same time, um, when we look at a couple positive things, I'm looking for a couple positive things, Josephine, away from regulations and away from whatever that we could critique. But I think that the federal government did put on the table a few $1 million to ensure that in the field of education, we just don't focus just on academics and whatnot, but that we can now focus on the trades for young people. And I think that's connected to the fact that um, to build this so many million housing within the whatever period of time, we need to have the labor force. We need to have labor to do this. And if our young people are not in the skilled trades, and if we are not encouraging that, then again we set ourselves further and further behind. So there is a little glimmer there
Mm-hmm.
that my grandsons and whatnot would have an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
like you have had, to get into the
Mm-hmm.
skills trade and be part of the workforce that would build us this 4 point something billion homes that we need within the next while.
One topic we didn't get into, I want to get back to that home ownership, the role that it plays in generational wealth, which is very important, for economic development, sustainability, etc. So, can we talk a little bit about that before we end the conversation? Josephine, do you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, w- home ownership is something that when I first came to Canada, I didn't think it was a possibility. It's one of the largest assets a family or a person will own, and equity grows over time. So homeownership can build financial stability and it creates opportunities for your children and establish a foundational for generational wealth. But it also requires knowledge, wealth creation, financial security, retirement planning, access to capital, um, just these are things that go hand in hand with home ownership. And the sad thing is that for the diverse community that Canada has, a large portion of us who are immigrants do not understand these concepts. So, homeownership is not only a path to financial success, but it should also be viewed as a sole measure of stability and achievement. But there's also more to it. It's not just a one linear access or one linear path to homeownership. There's other ways to get there. So we need to think about that as a community, and we need to think about that as and a day to day. So general wealth is not just about money, it's about opportunity.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a good one. That's a t-shirt right there.
Mhm.
Jean? It is. It is. Jean?
I think that for most people, the biggest investment that they have or will ever have would be the house or the property
Yeah, land.
or the land that
Hmm.
they're on. And so when we talk about generational and we talk about what we're leaving behind, um, it is important that we recognize that this, in many ways, we don't have a lot to leave for our children, but if we can, if we can pass on the house or the land, this would be the biggest investment that we would have.
Hmm. Somebody is mentioning uh, Build Canada Homes, that initiative. I think that's what you were talking about,
Yes,
Jean,
yes,
earlier,
yes,
that the
yes,
federal government introduced
yes.
recently. Hopefully, that can contribute to increasing the housing supply. One thing that worries me as I approach retirement is the housing crisis and the aging population. Can we quickly talk about that?
I can tell you that I made, Josephine, you might like that. I made a decision a number of years ago when I was buying my condo
Yeah.
that I would get it near the elevator and I
Yeah.
would get the parking spot also near the elevator. And I will not get, I had the option of looking at a townhouse, which was also attached to the building, with a lot of stairs going upstairs, a lot of stairs going downstairs. And I'm so happy now I didn't make that decision to buy the townhouse. And to when we talk about seniors and aging in place, those are important. That's important as you age, that you don't have to cope with, all the whatever design of a thing, and that you can You can stay as long as you possibly can in your home because, again, that opens up a whole lot of other questions, Sarah,
Hmm.
about aging and about home care and
Exactly.
supports and
Yep.
whatnot for people who age.
Hmm.
But I think that when I look back now, I thought it was a good decision I made,
Hmm.
because,
Josephine,
pardon?
Um,
you're the builder. So what's going on in building with seniors and,
I love what she says because I have a really good friend of mine that when he got his condo, he made sure that he was right in front of the elevator. When he goes downstairs, his vehicle's right at the parking spot there. And he's like, I had to look for so many places. To be able to accommodate that. And the sad thing is that, like, well, not the sad thing, Canadians are living longer. So there's more seniors looking
Yeah.
for housing options. But dignity, safety, and independence is still something that they want. Yet in many, many communities in Canada, there's not enough senior living options. And as a result, more seniors are just remaining in their larger family homes and they don't want to move. Not because of necessarily they don't want to move, but the cost of moving out and spending $5,000 to $8,000 a month
yeah,
on a property that is able to
ridiculous.
accommodate them
Yeah,
is ridiculous.
it is.
So why aren't we having that again in mind where these homes are ready to be sold, but again, there's no, it's affordability. It's affordability throughout, whether it's single townhomes, apartments, senior living. We don't have senior living homes where you have plus 55. I don't see them very much. It's very scarce. And again, just because you're over 55, you still want to be independent. You still want to have the decency of feeling like you're part of the community. So a lot of the times I'm African, so we can't just leave our elders out on the
No,
street like
no.
like my mom will be living with me for a very, very, very long time. But when
Mhm.
she does, or if she does decide to move to a senior living home, she has the ability to do so. And we're, as a collective, not spending $2,000 a month to be able to afford that type of basic necessity for her. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's crazy.
So to bring the conversation to a close, if you had three pieces of advice for advocates for housing equity, what would that be? Three pieces of advice.
Not,
One piece
go
for
ahead.
sure, I'll say is keep on advocating because it's the only thing that creates change and does make things better. The other is to people who are in decision-making places,
Hmm.
look at the regulations and look at the whatever that can make it more affordable and also more available, for community. And thirdly, the community to push for and to make sure that as community we we look for ways in which we could present to builders and others the kind of homes that could accommodate. We don't
Hmm.
necessarily have everybody to have a bungalow, but
Hmm.
there are ways in which we could do things, and we can learn from the indigenous experience and
Yeah.
from experiences other places where,
Hmm.
we can have some communal living, etc.
Exactly. Josephine?
So we need to work as a community. There are areas that we are focusing on, but we're not actually implementing. Community partnership, knowledge, are all part of that. So one, we need to ensure that housing is viewed not only as investment, but also a place for people to live and the basic necessity and included in healthcare, just your human rights. stronger partnerships, like I said, governments, not-for-profit builders, indigenous communities, and businesses. We have so many smaller businesses that would thrive for the opportunity to work with the government in terms of managing the housing crisis right now. And just a collective knowledge is simple power. When people understand housing, when it's not just a topic of conversation that we see on CP24 in the evening. It's an actual conversation that you're having with your family members and friends and whatnot. We can actually create some real solutions. So that would be my advice, just knowledge, partnership, and just work as a community.
Well, thank you both very, very much. And for those of you who are interested in um, just getting, a picture of the Black homeownership situation in Canada right now, I highly recommend a special report by CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's a project they did to look at the lay of the land in terms of Black home ownership. And what's great about it is it's available en français aussi pour nos francophones, which is great. So Buying While Black, that's the name of the report. Thank you both so much for sharing all your knowledge and your experiences in this area. I hope our audience learned a lot and will be motivated to go out there and implement some of the advice you just gave. Thank you.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing